This is the skeleton of a 16-3 British Warmblood dressage horse. It's the largest skeleton that we have in the Horses Inside Out collection, so great to compare to some of our smaller skeletons. The largest bone in the horse's body is the femur, this one here. Feel free to pick these bones up, handle them, have a good look at them, appreciate the size and the weight of these bones. Because this skeleton is disarticulated, basically loose bones, it's a really good opportunity to study the joint surfaces. You can spot a joint surface because generally the bone at a joint surface looks smoother and denser compared to other areas. It should be smooth. That's the sign of a healthy joint. Of course, in the live horse there would be hyaline cartilage covering that as well, but we can still get a good idea of the joint surfaces. This horse, I knew him very, very well, so it's interesting to appreciate this, how he used to go, his performance, how he moved compared to what we see in the skeleton. And talking about one joint surface that's particularly interesting, and that is the sacroiliac joint. So if we come to look at the pelvis, and just a quick note, by the way, how a pelvis should be, how it's orientated in the horse's body. It's easy when you see it flat on the table like this to think, well, that's how it is. But actually, if you take this part here, this is the pubis, and put it flat on the table like that, that will give you an idea of how it's orientated in the horse, because this area is pretty much horizontal when the horse is standing. But looking at it from this perspective, so you're looking now from in front, I'm standing by the tail. These are the two widest parts of the pelvis, and then this is the highest part. Here and here, the tuber cocci, and up here, the tuber sacrali. Between the two is the bone, the ilium. And on the underside of the ilium, you'll notice that there's a shape here and another one on the underside. This is actually the joint surface of the sacroiliac joint. So the sacrum attaches onto this. So we can pick up the sacrum. This here is the sacrum, and you can look, the corresponding joint surface on the sacrum will match and attach up onto the underside of the pelvis like this. So that's how the sacroiliac joint would be situated. It's interesting though to look at Leroy's joint surface of the sacroiliac, because you'll notice that there's roughened edges around here, and compare that to some of the other pelvises in the collection. This one, for example, although smaller, has a much smoother joint surface at the sacroiliac joint. Other interesting things to study with Leroy's skeleton is I've mounted the vertebrae on ropes, so you can easily pick the different sections up. This, for example, is the very front, the cranial part of the thoracic region. Here in my right hand, this is the first thoracic vertebrae. Basically, this is the withers here, and there's very, very little movement between these vertebrae. Now, when the bones are disarticulated like this, it's easy to try and imagine movement that's not there by taking the joints beyond their available range of movement. But if you look closely at the joint surfaces and appreciate how much movement, you can really get an idea of there's very, very limited movement in this area. We can compare this to this section here. This is the middle part of the horse's back, so we're carrying on. This is the area directly underneath where you'd be sitting when you're riding the horse. And once again, it's interesting to just feel and look at the sort of range of movement available. Very, very small amount of movement. And of course, when we come back here to the lumbar vertebrae, and indeed the lumbar sacral, and I hold these up like this, you can really see very, very little movement between these vertebrae. So do take the opportunity while the bones are loose, pick them up, have a feel of how much movement is available. Of course, we can compare this to the neck vertebrae. The sheer size, look how enormous these neck vertebrae are. when we're looking at pony bones, it's easy to think that they're big, but then of course 16.3, this is really a very large horse. So we can feel with these very large, flat facet joints. Look at the shape of these joints compared to the facet joints further back. And this helps to explain why there's so much movement in the neck. Leroy had quite a few problems while he was alive, and I think it's really interesting to study his bones with this in mind. One of them was all to do with his head, teeth and sinuses. So take the time to have a really good look at Leroy's skull. Look at the symmetry of the bones, and we can see he's actually even got quite an asymmetrical skull. You may look and notice that he's got a hole at this point here. He's also got a slight hole in here. This was actually because he had sinus surgery when he was alive. But before I get onto that, let me explain the root of this problem, literally the root, because we're talking about the teeth. And if I turn his head over, open them up, you can see on this side, he's actually had 2 teeth removed here, and there's quite a large hole. And it's actually worth trying to look through that hole, but also take a look at the back here. So you're looking through the back into the sinuses. So you're basically looking from the pharynx up through and out through the nostrils. So if I do that, you can see through the nostrils there. But you can also see, particularly on this side, how the sinuses, they've almost been obliterated compared to the other side. So he had some severe infection, and that was because he had tooth problems. And have a look in this pot here. I've got 2 teeth. This was the first tooth. He actually had a slab fracture. So when he was alive, this little bit of tooth broke off to the side, and then it was thought that meant the tooth was dead. So the whole tooth was removed. And that would have been causing problems, but actually, if the tooth is dead, it could track up towards the sinus. But this wasn't the only problem. When you look at this tooth, it's obviously not healthy, but if you compare it to this tooth, which although there's no slab fracture, it's complete, this is the surface where the horse would be chewing. But if I turn it round and you look at the root, you can see a big black hole. So basically the tooth had died, food was getting through the length of the tooth, bacteria and infection through up into the horse's sinuses. So this is where the problem was coming from. Obviously he had these teeth removed, but once he had infection within the sinus, it's quite a challenge to get that out. So a hole was drilled here to try and flush the sinuses out. And again, if you look through this hole, you can see into the sinus space as well. They then also did another bit of surgery where they cut the bone on 3 sides of a square here, and then open this. This is a nasosinus flap surgery where they literally open it like a window. They break the bone here, and then they can flush out all of the infection because it's really hard for it to come out. So they cleared that, put it back again. And the thing that I think is absolutely incredible is how quickly this bone healed. Interestingly, he did actually reject part of the bone, and this piece here, you can actually see the cut edge where they cut that during the surgery. So he rejected this piece of bone. So this came out probably certainly within a month after the surgery, and then all of this healing has taken place. It's sort of regrowth of the bone after the surgery, and it was within a year, unfortunately, that he was put to sleep. So it's not that long really for this bone growth to reform. So it's absolutely fascinating to consider that. And obviously this did cause him quite a lot of problems while he was alive. He also had a similar issue. If you want to turn the head over once more and look at the same 2 teeth on the other side, you can also see the beginnings of the same problem about to happen on the other side. So it's quite fascinating. And also, whilst we're on the teeth, do look at how the molars on the opposite side have changed shape in response to this gap. I think that's quite a fascinating thing to look at. So a lot to study with the head. Do have a look at all these bits and pieces that go with it. So another issue that Leroy had was asymmetrical front feet. His right foot was upright and boxy. His left front foot was bigger and flatter. And this is reflected in his bones. Take a good look at each of the 4 pedal bones, navicular bones, short pastern, long pastern, all those lower limb bones, and not just the front feet, but the hind limbs as well. And you can really spot a lot of asymmetry there. Of course, this had influence on his grazing stance. So he would always graze with his right front leg back, his left front leg forward. But it also influenced his movement. So when he trotted, he would extend the left forelimb forward with more expression and was happier to take the right front leg backwards. He was better bending on the right rein. He was had bending and, let's say, asymmetry was transferred from the front feet through to the back as well as up into the head and neck. So this really did affect him and his performance throughout his life. I think this is a fascinating skeleton to study. There's so much that we can learn from his bones. And like I always say, every bone tells us a story. Anatomy reflects function. If you want to learn more, if you want to see Leroy's skeleton for real, do come and join us at the Horses Inside Out Anatomy Exhibition. We run it every August, and as well as that, we have different courses throughout the year at Horses Inside Out HQ, where you can see Leroy as well as lots of other skeletons and anatomy exhibition pieces.